At least one corner of the U.S. space program, the policy seems to be waste not, want not. John Pilius reports on missiles more than 20 years old that still deliver.
The Atlas booster is a holdover from man's early space efforts. Designed almost 3 decades ago, the boosters are modernized at the General Dynamics plant here at Vandenberg. The Atlas is fitted with modified engines and state-of-the-art avionics that include integrated circuitry. The Air Force says the old workhorse is quite reliable.
Overall, our reliability is right around 96%. Our last failure when the Atlas launched here was December 1981. We've had 12 successes since that time.
The Atlas booster is now an important part of the U.S. space program, but its original purpose was a bit different.
The Atlas was designed as a strategic missile, an ICBM, in the early 1960s, and it was placed on alert at that time and was pulled off of alert in the mid-1960s, and we began to use them for various experimental purposes, including space launches.
In fact, it was an Atlas that launched John Glenn into America's first manned space orbit in 1962. One of the unique features of the Atlas is its extremely thin booster walls, thinner than a dime and stabilized on the launch pad by its load of almost 125 tons of liquid oxygen and kerosene. An Atlas will be used next month at Vandenberg to put a weather satellite into orbit. That satellite is also used to lock on to distress signals here on Earth and is credited with saving over 300 lives in less than 4 years of operation.
2, 1.
But with only 12 Atlas missiles left in current stock and no more on order, this old workhorse called Atlas may soon fade into memory. At Vandenberg Air Force Base, John Pilios, KCOY Newswatch.
Check 252. ATM.
LC, check 252.
ATM, my line.
Check 253.
That's conductors, my line.
Go ahead.
We saw about a 2% drop in the hydraulic pressure. That's the booster pressure. I would like to check ATM and BWC.
Engine start. Missile away.
Booster engines are up.
Check
Booster engines are up.
Check
We're in
273.
the roll program.
Copy, ignition liftoff.
Back at green.
Program nominal. Copy back as the program. We have radars on track. Give nominal steering.
Back at the nose.
Plus 30. Plus 40.
right decision. I think we should stop.
From KCOY-TV, this is Newswatch with Dave Hefferly and Kevin Shaw. Jim Barrick with the weather and sports with Lon McCarran. Newswatch, comprehensive news and information for the Central Coast.
4, 3, 2, 1, ignition. We have liftoff of Atlas 52E and the NOAA-G satellite.
The scene at Vandenberg Air Force Base today as the U.S. space program took a giant step back in the right direction. Good evening. Air Force and NASA officials say they're delighted with the success of today's launch of a $37 million weather satellite. John Pilios was at the base and joins us now with a report. John?
Thank you, Kevin. After having to scrub more than a dozen tentative launch dates, the Air Force put on an impressive show today. All those involved said it gives the country's space program a real shot in the arm.
4, 3, 2, 1, ignition. We have liftoff of Atlas 52E and the NOAA-G satellite.
Right on schedule at 8:52 this morning, the Atlas began its climb.
We hit everything essentially right on the nose. We had no problems of any kind. There were no holes in the countdown of any kind. And we had really nothing worth mentioning in the way of problems.
All the telemetry flags are proper, so that the deployments were all proper, and we're in the proper attitude, proper orbit, so it looks perfectly 100% successful.
The Atlas deployed a satellite that will keep watch on the world's weather and aid search and rescue efforts by picking up distress signals. But the accent at a post-launch news conference was on the recovery of the space program.
Got back on track with the Delta launch a couple of weeks ago, which was a NASA launch, NASA Delta. This one was, I think, equally important to keep the string going. We are back on track.
Despite a bank of low clouds that moved over the launch site moments before liftoff, the Air Force says weather was not a problem.
One of our primary sensors, as a matter of fact, was completely obscured by clouds. That didn't perturb us in the least. They could all have been obscured, and we would still launch if everything else was okay.
Air Force and NASA officials all agreed today's launch will go a long way in raising the morale of everyone involved in the space program. The NOAA satellite will attain a total polar orbit about once every 100 minutes.
John, when will the satellite begin picking up the distress signals, and who will benefit?
Well, the distress signals they'll start to pick those up in about 30 days, and they can pick them up sooner if a specific need comes up. And what they are is they're distress signals from ships lost at sea or downed airplanes, and it's an international effort with more than 120 countries being involved, Russia being one of those.
Quite an effort.
Yes,
all total, how much does this whole thing cost?
$37 million for the satellite, about $15 million for the launch, so $52 million all told,
okay,
roughly.
John. Okay, John, thank you. Dave?
The NOAA weather satellite is up and operating in its new orbit, but the celebrating is still going on at Vandenberg.
It's not just the successful launch of the Atlas rocket with this important payload this morning that has Air Force officials jubilant. It's what this success means to the total space program. Eric Spillman reports.
10, 9, 8,
This time, everything worked exactly as it was supposed to. There was good weather, a perfect countdown, a flawless launch.
3, 2, 1, ignition. We have liftoff. Liftoff of Atlas 52E and the NOAA-G
Atlas E
satellite.
rocket, the workhorse of the space program, is almost 30 years old. It is carrying a NOAA-G weather satellite into space.
All engines continue to function properly. Everything looking good at this time. The roll and pitch maneuver being verified at this time.
Within minutes, the rocket and the satellite separate. The satellite goes into a polar orbit 450 miles above the Earth.
Now being confirmed.
Within a few hours, it is already sending back pictures that will help forecasters predict the weather all over the world. This launch received a lot of attention. There were more reporters here today than at any other launch at Vandenberg in recent years. It is because America's space program is trying to come back, trying to recover from the Challenger accident and the Titan rocket explosion that happened at Vandenberg back in April. This time, there was nothing but good news to report.
And we had really nothing worth mentioning in the way of problems. Unique experience.
The deployments were all proper, and we're in the proper attitude, proper orbit, so it looks perfectly 100% successful right now.
NASA now has 2 successful rocket launches to brag about. A Delta liftoff at the Kennedy Space Center 2 weeks ago, and today's Atlas launch. They have boosted morale for the people who work on the space program.
A whole lot of things had to happen to have that satellite get to where it is right now, and it does a lot of good to have that sort of thing happen as well as it did.
At Vandenberg Air Force Base, Eric Spillman, Action News.
Another launch will take place at Vandenberg tomorrow morning at 5:30, and MX missile will be tested. It will be the 14th MX missile test so far. Barbara?